Tiberius Baraza, the Vice Chair of English Language Professional Association, will be co-facilitating with me. Jane, who is the secretary, will be moderating together with Rukia Mohammed, who is at the background, will share the slides. And then we'll also have Constance, who will also be with us, our treasurer. I think most of you have met her. So this webinar, probably I can ask Tiberius to introduce himself first before I continue. Tiberius, can you introduce yourself and welcome the participants? Yes, Tiberius. If Tiberius is not there, are you getting me? Are you hearing me? Am I audible, everyone?
Yes,
Yes,
Chair.
you
You're
are.
audible.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So probably Tiberius will introduce himself later on. I know he's having network challenges. So welcome to today's webinar. I think we'll even have time. So if you have joined now, please introduce yourself in the chat. And today we are going to look at understanding educational policies and practices related to assessment, part 1. That is today, June 2024. We go to the. Can you share the screen, Rukia? So as Rukia, can you share the screen? Yes.
I look for, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is, I'm seeing it, yeah. So let's go to the next slide. Yes, thank you very much, everyone. In this webinar, we will discuss what assessment is, discuss types of assessment, discuss experiences of assessment in different contexts. When we were learners in school, we'll assume you're learners. You have to reflect. When you are in college or at the university, when you are being trained as a teacher, your experience when you went to school for the first time, and then maybe another opportunity you have acquired as a national examiner, you'll also have to share experiences of such. And then we'll briefly talk about different types of assessments. So in our next webinar, this is part 1, part 2, assessment policies. We'll have that on 31st July, and after it will be after we'll have held, maybe met some of the chapter leaders, and we'll let you know, we'll keep you posted about the policies of assessments, and in fact, we'll share in advance so that when you come to the webinar, probably you'll have something to share. Thank you. Next one, next slide. So in this, what types of assessment is this? Can you look at the picture and then write in the chat, what type of assessment do you think is this one? We can share in the chat. Our moderator will read a few of your messages in the chat or responses. So can we use the chat to share? Look at it keenly and then try to figure out what type of assessment is this in the chat.
Irene is saying peer assessment.
Yes. Jen said, Irina said peer assessment. I may not give the answer right now because we'll get to that later on. Somebody else?
We have Lydia say oral, Trespory. Mbula said formative assessment.
Yes.
Odilia said presentation.
Yes, yeah. Yes, so they are giving various answers, summative, formative. Probably one of them can maybe give us only one reason why you think it is formative assessment from your knowledge of formative assessment. You can also share on the chat.
We have Geoffrey saying it's oral and observation.
Yes, oral and observation. So that's why it's formative. So because it's sort of we'll come to that later on when we are defining formative assessment. So can we go to the next slide, Jane? Yes, so this other one, what type of assessment is this one? If you look at the learners, so can also share your thoughts in the chat. I can,
we have Odilia
yes.
from Oman says some standardized exams have oral. So Odilia is giving the reason as to why.
Yeah, the definition of the type of the assessment. Yeah. So what I think is right, but later on when we look at types of assessment, we'll have to compare that one between criterion reference, the types of assessment we have. So how about this other one? What are they saying, Jane, in the chat?
Still waiting for the responses. Odilia said assessment for learning.
Yes. So saying the assessment for learning.
This one is saying diagnostic assessment. We have Tresfori saying diagnostic assessment. I hope I'm
so that's
right.
giving us another type, diagnostic, giving us another type of assessment. So we have had about formative, diagnostic. So can you go to the next slide so that we see another one?
We also have skill assessment. Then we have this other third one.
Yes, so we have this other third one. So can also they share in what type of assessment this? Can you share in the chat? Yes, I'm seeing the message again. Yes.
Mbula says it is summative assessment.
So Mbula said summative assessment. Yes. Maybe somebody with a reason why it should be summative. Yes. So people to share in the chat. Yes. If we don't have sharing in the chat, probably they'll have time. If there's still time, you can share as we go on. So we can go to the next slide. So in the next slide, what does assessing learners involve? Some of these things are things that you've known, but we just want to get maybe a few ideas here and there. Applying the principles and practices of assessment to design tasks for measuring learners' progress. Assessment also involves utilizing a range of different types of assessment and feedback. It also involves defining appropriate assessment criteria and or applying assessment criteria consistently, because if you have to assess, you have to be consistent. Analyzing learners' errors and providing constructive feedback, engaging learners in self and peer assessment and develop their self peer assessment skills, as you have seen in one of them, where the peers were discussing one of the photos that we've just displayed. I think all of this, if you look at the whatever you've seen in our previous slides, at least you can have an idea of what we were saying. Preparing, administering, grading, and keeping records of assessment, sharing assessment data appropriately with parents, guardians, and learners, and others. I think we'll have to discuss that later on, the need to share assessment with the data with the parents, guardians, and learners and others, reflecting on the effectiveness of my assessment with learners' progress. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. So for this, this just a guide for this webinar today. If you need to do a bit of, if you want to get some more information, we are using two websites: the Teaching English, www.teachingenglish.org, also using www.africateachingenglish.org.uk. That one is the latter is the website for the Sub-Saharan Africa, and the former is the website English for the UK. That is the major one that we have ideas from. So if you go to the two websites, you can, and you go to Assessing Learners, you get some articles, range of useful articles written by ENT experts that can give you information on assessment. Magazines are also there, a range of them published or written by English bloggers around the world that are professionals in assessment and give you ideas about assessment, and probably other areas also within the website or the British Council resources, other publications, research papers, webinars, and so on. There are so many that can give you ideas. As I said, these webinars, we are going to develop them, and sometimes before we go to the next one, we'll give you ideas so you can do some research so that you can get more ideas. Next slide. So we have what we call teacher cognition and assessment. There's a pop quiz. There'll be some quotations, and I would ask you to consider each quotation below and write in the chat how it relates to classroom assessment practice. The quotes focus on experiences of assessment which the speakers experience while at school, as I said. So while you are still at a school, assume and reflect when you are still a learner. Do some of them reflect any of your experiences of assessment, the kind of assessment, the tests that you are given as a learner in your high school, primary school? So we can go to the next slide. So here we have assessment experiences for some teachers or experts when they were learners. So quote one, there's the first quote. Probably you can ask somebody to unmute and read for us the first quote and the second quote. One of the participants can unmute and read for us.
Yeah.
The first quote.
Yes, please.
Okay. My teachers like to give us tests, multiple choice tests, writing tests.
Yes, yes. So that's the first quote. Can you also read for us the second quote?
I think we lost her. We can have someone else to read.
So can do so.
Thank you so much, Fatima. You can go ahead.
The grades were shady. We never knew why you got a B or a C. I didn't like that.
Yes. Thank you very much for that. So these are, if you go back to what you have to consider, do they reflect any of your experiences in terms of assessment? So you can go to the next slide. As you think about them.
Chair, we have Nuru who says quote 2 was KCSE. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes. Yeah, let's give them time to share their thoughts. So quote
We have
2, support KCSE. Thank you very much, because you can't tell. You never got the feedback. How you got a B
That
or
is
a
true.
C or yeah.
We have Stephen
Yes.
who got.
Somebody want to respond to quote 1?
Yes, we
Go
have
ahead.
Stephen who said quote 1, that is his real experience, is real in my experience, quote 1.
Good. Yes, it's really experience.
Mhm.
Yes. Other person?
And no, I think we can continue.
Then you can go
Others
to the next slide.
experience.
Yeah,
Yes.
can go to the next slide, Rukia. Yes. So the next slide is a commentary from some scholars. So this is just some researchers who have done a bit of research on assessment. Some scholars have suggested that teachers replicate the assessment practices they experience as school children. Testing as you were tested. I don't know whether some of us do that, and that is the authorities are there. The Vigot and Sagari 2014 say that. And this could represent a break on innovation, as teachers are not using the most up-to-date assessment techniques. So some teachers would just go back to the way they were taught by their teachers so many years ago, and they don't use a lot of innovation. Next slide. Yes. So this you can put your we can now discuss and put your ideas in the chat. So would you consider your approach to assessment to be similar to the one you experience as a language student at school? Why? And why not? Do you agree with the ideas that teachers test as they were tested? If you agree, why do you agree? If you don't agree, why not? So let's have some conversation in the chats. Or somebody can even unmute and answer address one of those areas.
We can have people raise their hands. In case you're unable to do that, we can also write in the chats. So meanwhile, we have okay, so I have Antonin says, I think my earphones are not available. Oh, okay. Maybe you can try to join the meeting again, see whether it is possible to hear.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Yes. And we welcome those who have joining the chat and also respond what we have on the chat. Yes, I'm not seeing suggestions on the chat.
We can have people.
Yes.
So the question the chair has stated, oh, we have one. But the question is, do you agree with the ideas that teachers test as they were tested? Why and why not? Do we continue to do that or not? So we have Mvula, who has said teachers test the learners, but yes, they, I guess how we do can be out of the learner's assessment need. That's what he says. So that's Mvula.
Yes, so it's not agreeing because saying it depends on the kind of assessment. Yes, he's right.
We have someone who is very honest. My approach is pretty much the same as I was tested. That's Irene.
Oh,
thank you for honesty.
Yes, Irene, that's better.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have any other suggestions? So if we don't have, we can go to the next one, next experience. Next slide, Rukia. Yes, thank you very much. Now, during the training, most of us went to different colleges and they were trained as teachers. So during your training, whichever college you went, university, so this section will feature on the quotations from teachers who are talking about their training experiences. So the same thing we are going to do. We are going to consider each quotation and how it relates to classroom assessment. And then you will post your comments in the chat. So look at and consider how it relates to classroom assessment practice that you have now. Does it relate to what you are doing now? What you learned at training? Next slide.
Chair, there's a suggestion you move this at the speaker.
Yes.
It's that you are a bit faint.
Oh yes, I'm not clear.
Yes,
Am I audible now? Are
I
you
think
hearing
that's
me,
okay.
Jen? Oh,
Yes,
it's
Chair.
okay. Maybe I was very far from the speaker. So quote one, can somebody read quote one for us? A volunteer?
Okay. Quote one, the teacher training course did not help me at all. Quote
Yes.
two, I remember very much it was about terminology, practicality, authenticity, validity, reliability, washback, transparency. It was more about construct validity and these academic terms. There was nothing practical on the course.
Yes, thank you very much. So you can post now on the chat. You can, if you agree with quote one, quote two, what are your thoughts about quote one and two? The comment. So we can have suggestions on the chat. Your thoughts about it.
So as we wait for the suggestion, yeah. Someone is saying, Ombiru says, Catherine, I would like my assessment to be different from the one used to test my competency, since it covered some section of what was taught and also didn't consider our talented areas, though I can mix. Then you have Mercy from the previous question you had asked. So testing is still the same, RATs and CATs. Same thing. That was from the previous question. Yes.
Yeah. Then there's Steve Nonyango saying,
yeah, Stephen says, oh, we have, and you move so fast, okay. So quote two, Stephen says quote two, limited relationship to the experience. Limited relationship to the school experience.
Yes, Machara is saying there's no sound. Where is it? Could it be coming from? Am I being heard? No sound from where?
Yes,
Macharia?
now you are.
Yes, can I be heard now?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So go ahead, Jen.
We have Geoffrey who is saying CBC requires a teacher. Yes. CBC requires a teacher not to rely so much on tests. Then we have Irene Kando saying, quote two for me. It was more of what is expected of the teacher rather than what the teacher should do. There were very limited time for practice. I must agree with that. Then we have Danson. There's a lot of emphasis on theory instead of theoretical and So instead of practice, testing is more theoretical than practical, especially on important skills such as speaking skills. Yes, that's from Danson.
Yes, I agree with Danson. And what do the others think? What do the others think?
Then we have Nuru said, quote two, for her. Too much theory and general knowledge in class. You learn more during teaching practice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nuru. Nuru shared yesterday in our yesterday's webinar. I liked her presentation. Thank you, Nuru.
Then we have Kelvin. In my
Uh-huh.
training, I learned leadership, guidance, and counseling, and some practical parts in some units like teaching practice and micro teaching. The rest was theory. That's for Catherine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so there are good ideas and good suggestions. People are really sharing. So can we move to the next slide? Let them, the charts keep on using the charts. Next slide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those.
Yes, so thank you very much for the comments. Now we look at the experts. What are they saying about that? Do they agree with us or from their research? So several survey studies, Fulcher 2012 and Osel Green, Castle and Holmes 204 and Bigot, Sagari, they have suggested that teachers are not adequately trained in issues relating to assessment. They suggest that this lack of training could lead to poor assessment practice in the classroom. But other scholars like Malone and Brown have suggested that teachers find assessment course focus too much on terminology and not on practical tasks. So that is their argument. You may agree or not agree, but that's the argument. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, so discussion, you can post in the chat again. So how much attention was paid to assessment during your teacher training course? Did you feel prepared to assess students when you started teaching? Why? Why not? What was the focus of your assessment training? Was terminology discussed more than practical activities? Why not? So let us share our experiences during the training based on those questions that we have there. So can post on the chat. Jane?
Yes, as we wait for the your views on the question that Chair has said, we have Christine who says, teacher training doesn't fully prepare you for classroom assessment. We learn from experience more. I must agree with that. Yeah, you learn in the job. So, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
We're still waiting for your views. The questions are on the screen. Yeah, so we have two. We have dance on. I don't remember studying anything on testing in my undergraduate. I did not experience highlights on terminologies. I did not experience highlights on terminologies in assessments. That's Odelia. Then we have Fatma, who says, yes, I felt prepared.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes, go
Fatma
ahead,
said,
Jane.
okay, thank you. Yes, I felt prepared because we had many practical teaching sessions in campus.
Yes.
Then we have Steve, who says, I felt totally unprepared. My first cut was awful. My HOD made several corrections. Then we have Nuru, who says, we learn more on the job during NEC training. I wish all teachers would, all teachers trained by NEC at the university or college level. Then we have Irene also. There is only 2 sessions for the whole course duration and not everyone was assessed. So you get to class and boom, you get hit by a reality that we need to practice more. Then you have Catherine says, I think I've said and dwell, sorry, on assessment, on questions formulation before we go to the methods of assessment. Most teachers do not know how to formulate a test. They copy, paste, and lift from what is already formulated, hence repeating the same thing and content in every test. I must agree about that. Yeah. So we have Mvula. Teacher training was not put in the way that a teacher can be able to share experience in assessing learners. Then you have Odilia. Training summarized summative and formative assessment only. The rest learned on the job. Then we have Ochieng. Workshop have helped a lot. Then we have Mercy. Mercy says nothing much on assessment when being trained. You have Christine. More emphasis was placed on class teaching than assessment. It was very minimal and was taught, and what was taught was very theoretical. I owe my assessment skills to my mentors, not college. So I think most people seems not to have been prepared. A huge number of people, Chair.
Yeah, sorry about that network problem. I'm in the village.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry
sir,
about
again.
that. So I'm saying most people have not had, they don't feel the training was adequate. And some saying they have had to on the job, especially training and doing MOOCs. Learning assessment on the job, especially training and doing MOOCs. Then we have, so much has changed. I don't think what we learned is relevant. That is what Adelia
Yeah,
says.
so I'm not seeing the screen, Rukia. Can you share the screen again, Rukia?
Tiberius is sharing.
Oh, Tiberius, yeah. Tiberius, can you move where there's a network and share the screen? You stop sharing the screen.
Are you sure, Chairman?
Yes, yes, I'm not seeing it from my end. So, as we wait for Tiberius to share, we want to look at our experiences from practice.
Can you see it now?
I want now to focus. I don't know, are we able to see it, all of us? I cannot see it from my end. Then we're able to see the screen.
I think from my end, I'm able to see.
Yes, and the participants are there to see. Because I'm wondering why I cannot see it. I can, let me stop the video so that I can see if I can see it.
Majority
Yes,
can
Abela,
see.
can you try? I've stopped my video. Yes. So, Jenny, if you can see the screen and the others can see the screen, can they confirm on the chat if they can see the screen?
Yes, yes. Majority can see it from the screen.
Yes, then
can
we can go to the next one. Yes, practice. The next slide. So, because I'm now looking at it manually. So, experiences from practice. Jen, can you read what is there to confirm if I'm here together?
Sorry?
Read what is the screen, somebody is to confirm if
I think
Okay, Chairman, let me help you.
Yeah.
Let me help you, Chairman. Okay, Jen,
Yes.
we are there more chats on these responses?
So yes, I also have.
Next screen. Next slide. Experiences from practice.
So meanwhile, we have Catherine who has said, what is mostly discussed in workshop is what to test, but not how to formulate questions. So there is improvement in paper 3, but in other papers. But in other papers.
Okay.
So yeah, we were unable to hear you. I think you have to talk, but right now you're audible.
Yes, I know I was kicked out and I think I'm back now. So now we will focus on experiences as teachers. All of us now here are teachers in the classroom. So let us focus on our experiences. So can we go to the next slide? Can we go to the next slide, Jen? Yeah. Yes. So we had in the previous, that we did in the previous slides, now we'll also look at our experiences and look at quotes from teachers in the field like you. So can somebody, maybe there are 4, we can have some participants again to read for us some of these quotes from teachers.
Okay, let me read. Quote 1.
Yes, thank you.
I did well in bracket traditional tests, but I simply realized that that was not the best method to evaluate my students. Quote 2. So I realized in bracket traditional tests wasn't the way to motivate students. I realized I was closing the loop. Quote 3. At the beginning, I reproduced what I was exposed to. It was only when I started having exposure to different ideas, I realized that I could do something different. And quote 4, my experience taught me things I should stop doing.
Yes, can you post your thoughts now, your on the charts? And traditional test, I think here, I mean when you are posted to the school, the kind of testing system that they were using, because you can get the head of exams there, the HOD exams, and then you would just work on the way things were being done in that school where you went. And in quote 2, closing the loop here, I realized I was closing the loop here. In assessment, you also have to interact with the learners. There should be some kind of dialogue. But if it's one-sided, you are assessing them and then there's no dialogue, you're not getting anything from them. You have closed them out of the assessment. That is what quote 2 is talking about. So can we get suggestions from the chat?
Yes. We can also raise our hands if you have something to say.
Yeah.
That would also work.
Yes, somebody can even unmute and discuss, because that's now the real experience we have in class, in our context. We have similar experiences. Does it relate to your classroom assessment and practice? The quotes, whichever you've chosen. Yes. Constance, can you tell us something? Constance there.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we're able to hear you.
Hello, we're hearing you. Just go ahead. We're hearing you.
Okay, this is Steve. Allow me to weigh in.
Yes.
Allow me to weigh in. I just want to weigh in, especially on this quote number 1. I did well at traditional test, but I simply realized that was not the best method to evaluate my students. You know, the reason why I realized that was because some students, they know some things. When you're talking to them, sometimes they know those kind of things, but now writing those things now become a problem. So I realized that when I just subject them to that most of the time written tests, they don't do well, but they can end up doing well in the oral tests. That is how I weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Shall we have Regan? Sorry?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So we have Regan Otieno. He agrees with quote 3. Being practical really proves to be an essential aid in teaching. Whatever you're learning new, apply it as long as it is relevant. Yeah. So we can agree with quote 3.
Yes. Anybody with quote 4? So if we don't have, let us go ahead and look at what people have said, the authorities in assessment. Can you go to the next slide? Next slide. Ombiru, Kevin, I think I agree with him. Jen, you'll read that one before we look at the comments.
Catherine says, unfortunately, we use the same ways in school, but I try to bring in something different to motivate this generation. I realized that they just sit for tests because they must to. I started motivating them by rewarding their performance and giving them time to relate their answers with others and also from notes. Then we discuss to an agreement. Yes. So, Chair, we have like 13 minutes to time.
Yes, so we can just read what's in the commentary.
Yes, so we have Mercy. Yes. Mercy says, quote 1, what happened and still happens quite a lot. Then quote 2, I still don't do this sincerely. I need to be guided on how to go about it. The best I do is to tell them that I will test what I have taught. Sincerely, I am glad that we have the new curriculum. Then you have Catherine says, building the attitude is very important. And Irene says, my experience taught me to stop analyzing learners based on cuts only because maybe they didn't understand an area set properly. Yeah.
Thank you. Next slide, as they respond, we just go to the next slide. Commentary, next slide. Erokia? Oh, it's Tiberius, eh?
Yeah,
Next slide, Tiberius. We are used to doing it for us. Eh? So Tiberius is sleeping on the job. Tiberius.
We appreciate your input.
Yes,
These are quite,
yeah, so Jen, you can just read for us that commentary because of time.
Yes, so we have a commentary. There's some research by Combs, De Luca, La Pointe, McN1, and Charles 2018, and Shilhan and Munro 2017, which suggests that teaching experience is fundamental to the development of assessment practices. It would seem that time in the classroom and reflection on experiences is how teachers develop their assessment practices. Yes.
Next slide. Next slide. Tiberius, yes. Yes, so next slide. Has your approach to assessment changed as you have gained more classroom experience? If so, in what ways has it changed? Have you ever had training experience which led to a complete change in your approach to teaching or assessment? What was the training? What changes did you make? So can we consider this one's also in the chat? For example, I want to give an example. I've been involved with the teachers so much, and in Seah district, we had a Seah mock, and also Better Seah, they had some exams. So I can remember there was paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, and by then paper 1 was composition. So we would exchange papers. So if maybe attach on your toe, and then you are the only teacher in the school, and you have to mark composition, you have to mark grammar, you have to mark literature, and the deadline is there. You have to take the scripts back because it was marking for another school that you paired up with. So I had an experience as a teacher because of the secretary. I marked my students' work, and it was composition. And there was no mark at all. There was just a very big tick at the end, and the child was given T. As we said earlier. So I was really wondering, how no comment, no red mark anywhere, but just a tick at the end, and imagine composition. And then the child is given 8 out of 20. I think that was a C minus. So it was challenging as a leader. We had to sit with that teacher and organize some training as a teacher organization. And we trained teachers when we were moderating the marking schemes. And then the improvement, the next round of the exam the following year, there was an improvement. So that is also something that we have experienced in my teaching career, that some of us don't actually mark properly. The training, if they don't get the training, they don't know what to do, and they have to assess because it's a task they have to do. So you can look at that, and then we can go to the next slide. Tiberius, let's go to the next slide. Tiberius, yes. Now I think this other one, because of time, would have gone into groups, but we shall focus on the relationship between examiner training and assessment practice in class. So how does each quote relate to classroom assessment practice? Quote one, Jen can read for us, quote one.
So quote one says, being an examiner, I become more aware of what we do in the classroom, the type of things we correct, we emphasize what to correct in essays. Then we have quote two, that training was quite helpful to assess my students in a more informal way. I became more analytical about assessing the quality of my students' speaking.
Yes, very good. So we have national examiners here, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. Perhaps they can share their experiences here as trained examiners on the chat. Yeah, they can share experiences on the chat. Yes, Tiberius, can we move to the next slide? As they think about that, we will still consider whatever they are sharing. Yes, next slide. So the commentary, the type of assessment knowledge would seem to be form part of the professional coursework. That's according to Bob, who was my also lecturer, Framework of Language Teacher Cognition. That's the book that is published. It would seem that professional training experiences can influence classroom assessment practice. So I agree with most of us who are examiners that there's something you get after being trained as an examiner. I'm an examiner in paper 2, and the first thing I learned when I was trained as an examiner is about the size of the tick. Before I trained as an examiner, the tick would even touch the candidate's work. But when I was trained as an examiner, now I would control my ticks and it would not interfere with the candidate's work. And there are also rubrics that I used to follow. I think colleagues in paper 3 will also agree with me and paper 1 that after the training, at least there's some value added to your practice. So we can have some comments on the chat. So the discussion, have you trained to be an examiner? If so, how has examiner training influenced your assessment practice? Have your experience of being an examiner changed your approach to marking and correcting written work? If so, how? So would like to get more of your discussions on the chat.
Yes, Chair, there is a discussion here by Stephen. He says, it's true that continuous training helps and improves teachers' assessment skills. And you have Mercy who says, the NEC training is a game changer. When it comes to assessment, you find yourself teaching and putting emphasis on what is expected of them in KCSE, that is Kenya Certificate of Secondary Examination. I am an examiner in paper 1.
Yes, thank you for that. Any other? Yes, so I think we still encourage more. I can see Pepper 3 is there. Danson Kimati. Yes,
It says,
Danson.
it helped me redefine my teaching, especially on question 1, imaginative writing, because it is an area that I used to ignore initially. Yeah, that's what Danson says.
Yes. So there are more still coming. We can go to the next slide. Next slide, Tiberius. Yes. So the next slide, I don't want to talk about it. You can just read it. It's on the screen. We have been talking about teacher cognition. So, and teacher assessment identity. So that's what we have been talking about as a teacher. We have been journeying through your life as a student, as in your college, when you started teaching, and also as an examiner. So that is what that one is talking about, teacher cognition. So I may not dwell that into so much into that. You can just read it. Give you 1 minute to read it. Then you can move to the next slide, Tiberius. Yes. So teacher assessment identity as a teacher who's been doing assessment. So you can also read what is there. 1 minute to read it. Yes, so that is very important because when you are engaged in assessment work with students and focuses on simply not on what teachers do, but on who they are. So that is very good for teacher identity. Next slide. So the next slide is what is a summative and formative assessment that we started with. Any ideas in the chat? As I welcome Tiberius to take over from there, who will also take us through within maybe about 10 minutes and we will be done. So please be patient.
Okay, Chairman.
Welcome, Tiberius. Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is more of a summary. What we have been discussing can be summed under these two categories, summative or formative. So I think we are just going to go through what we've already gone through, which can be broadly summed up as either summative or formative. Maybe I can just define for the interest of time, then in the chat you can give your own personal experiences with either of the two. Summative, we all know, assessment is at the end. I want to underline that, at the end of an instructional unit or class. So it sums up the learning that has occurred, and that is what our system has really been insisting on. I believe CBC is taking us where I am going to talk about formative assessment. With formative, we underline the word during. So with formative, it is something that is continuous, is something that goes on in class. And most of us who are in the other system, 844, we were not well, we didn't have good orientation about assessment because we believed that with assessment, you must be graded. I saw some comment after the quote by the chairman about B, A, B, C, D. That's all we knew about assessment or percentage marks. But you learn that with CBC and with our current situation, it's not about those grades and those marks. It's more about the simple learning processes that go on, which cumulatively comes up to summative, but the most important is emphasis now is on formative during the process of assessment. So you, just as I've said, when we talk about summative, you are simply judging or calculating how well a student learned or mastered some materials. knowledge or skills. It's normally with an outcome using a rubric. There is a standard that has been set, which you must attain. Then it's at the end of a chapter, semester, or 4 years in Kenya system, at the end of Form 4, at the end of first term, second term. We have all those kind of exams that we give learners. But with formative, it is before a final task. And this is what all of us should learn, because every day we are interacting with these learners in the classroom, and assessment does not have to be paper. Let me clarify that. With formative, assessment does not have to be paper. So assessment is in the small things you want to find out from the learners and make them improve or make them do better in their eventual summative test or cumulative test at the end. I don't know, do your students fear exams? Do they fear assignments in class? How do you give responses to your students? Maybe in the chat, you could be writing that. Jane will be reading as I continue. How your students feel about summative when you announce that on Monday we have an exam.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do your students feel about this kind of situations compared to a situation where you assess them in the class in the process of learning, where you get feedback from the learners as you continue teaching? I don't know, even at your level, which one do you prefer? Which one gives you butterflies and which one makes you learn in a relaxed way? Jane, is there any?
They haven't responded to that. However, we have Vula. Let me start with Selman, who says formative assessment can be done during the period of lessons, but summative assessment is at the end of the term or the year. Then we have formative from Vula says formative assessment is done during the course, like continuous test, and summative is done at the end of the course, like national exam. Thanks. I'm leaving the meeting. I have another meeting in Telta. Thank you so much for joining. Then we have Abdul says, summative is done to sum up the whole teaching session. So at the end, where else formative is done during the teaching session to strengthen the students' comprehension. And we have Christine who says formative is more relaxed and my students even enjoy the session. Steven says there's always panic when they hear of summative assessment. Yeah.
Wow. So that's good feedback. With a formative, it's a relaxed way of giving the students feedback, and it doesn't have to be you. That's the good thing about formative assessment. With formative, it has to be you, but with formative, it can be you, the teacher. It can be among the peers themselves. They can give each other feedback, and it can be self-assessment. The learner can give themselves feedback so long as they know what is expected. So when you look at the teacher, you require them to maybe hand in preliminary draft versions of essays or tasks or products. Then you can make comments or just have a checklist that can explain how the student can improve their work. You can also have a rubric with indicators. I know people who are in CBC, you are familiar with this. Then you can provide feedback about what additions, changes, or improvements the student or group needs to make. And those of us who teach in the classroom, it's good when you give them a writing activity, you make it a process of assessment. They write, maybe, let me say you teach a Form 4 class and you have given them, you have taught minutes, then you want them to write minutes. You get them right, you go through the draft, get it back to them until they have understood the concept. So with formative, you make learning a process. You, as a teacher, you give feedback as the learners continue. With the peers, you can allow them to correct each other among themselves. They can exchange essays, they can exchange grammar items, they can exchange, and before the work comes to you, they can actually give themselves feedback and correct themselves. There are situations where, like in our school situation, the class is so large, you may not be able to give feedback to all learners. But there are among the classroom, the learners who are fast and who can give the other peers feedback. And then eventually they correct. And by the time you are having a final exam or product, the corrections are well done and satisfactory. Then we have self, where the learner assesses themselves. That is self-feedback. We have exit tickets. I know these ones we have shown you before. We have 1-minute papers where the teacher poses 1 or 2 probing or open-ended questions and the students answer in very short time. You can get feedback. They assess themselves. You can also just assess by observing them. If they have understood, it's all over their faces. If you have been teaching yourself, it's also all over their faces. So sometimes self-assessment can even be a diagnostic test. Before you teach a topic, you can want to know how much do they know about this before I even want to teach them. Can conduct a survey so that you measure learning from what they knew before and what you gave them after. Jen, is there anything in the comment?
Yes, there's quite a lot. Thank you everyone who is engaging. So we have Jacqueline who says formative assessment done during instruction is more relaxed and you get real-time feedback. Then we have Befe who says, I hope I got that right, formative is used as a form of giving feedback. We have Catherine who says usually formative is more constructive than summative. And you have Jacqueline who says peer feedback is possible with formative assessment. And Catherine adds, it is usually constructive when learners and teachers have a rubric. Then we have Asma who says, Frederica said sure. Then Asma says formative assessment promotes a more positive and supportive learning environment where students are empowered to take ownership of their learning journey and grow continuously. Yes.
Wow, that's very good feedback, and I hope we put this into practice. Oh, there's a hand. Jonjo Kahato hand is up.
Yes. Jonjo can say something.
And then there's somebody greeting Jen at Aspire.
Jen, respond to the greeting.
Happy to see you here.
Okay. Sorry, let's continue. So what we are agreeing, all of us, is if you want to foster student engagement in class and to build a motivated classroom, then you have to emphasize or make use of formative assessment, because what we see from formative, it increases students' feelings or relatedness. You know, it also builds their confidence and competence. The students feel more confident when they're in charge of their assessment as compared to when you as a teacher is in charge. It's good when you allow a student with the agreed rubric, the way one of us has put in the chat, to look at themselves like a mirror. They look at themselves, they correct themselves, they go to their peers, they correct each other. But we were brought up in those years where a teacher would throw an insult, you are as stupid as something else, I don't know. You remember those days where it was very harsh. But this one, the learner corrects and builds confidence from what they are learning. Then it also increases students' feelings of relatedness and builds community. Students interact. Formative assessment makes them work together to help each other. Then also helps to foster the autonomy because the student decides how to make changes in response to the assessment. Sometimes you can even find a student will be prompted to come and see you or consult you freely without you having to really persuade them, because they have this sense of wanting to change or wanting to do something different. Then also it gives us opportunity to receive meaningful feedback that supports them along the way to mastering outcomes and course materials.
Yes, there's a question here from Catherine that says, are any of us here using project-based learning approach? That's a good question.
Okay, good question. I decided so, although with 844 is not much, but I decided I've been teaching so many functional writing items in Form 3 and Form 4. And so I decided how do I make my Form 3s understand this? So lately they have class meetings. And I decided this, that every class meeting, they must write minutes. And these minutes must be interchangeable. So every meeting they write, a different person writes. And at the end of my half term, you get them really involved and you have given them the rubric and you see them give feedback. And sometimes they even write a notification of a classroom meeting. Real things, a project-based way. Sometimes personal journals also, we use project-based approach. Personal journals, when they are over half term, we give them to go and do that, and then they come and we share. So yes, project-based learning can be applied in even a small way. I think project-based learning should just be limited to a real project that takes maybe time, but even what you do with them in class, you can make it a project and be more practical. That's my view. Maybe somebody else has something. Jen?
Yes,
Hello?
there's one. Yes, thank you so much. Catherine has responded. So we actually have a few things, a few comments. So Befe says, but we are more fond of summative. I wonder why. Then we have Frederick says, perhaps our system in Kenya is examination oriented. Then Catherine responds, PBL and formative are inseparable, since most of our work as teachers is to facilitate and guide our milestones guides to growth. Yes.
Wow, that's good feedback. There's something here that we can respond, but Jane, you can guide us. I think if there are no.
Comment. So we have Matthew. I think this will change with CBC in senior secondary school. That is true. I must agree. Already the primary school have started using content learning.
Okay.
In the classroom recorded, and it will be part of the summative, will be put together with the summative. Then we have Rukia says with TBC, it is more project oriented. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think we can put in the chat our takeaway from today as we come to a close. Maybe, Chairman, do you have something?
Yes, thank you very much, Tiberius, and I would like to thank all of the participants very much for attending, participation, and let them just reflect on what we have on the screen. And I think what I can say is that go to the next one. The next slide. Yes, so thank you very much, and don't forget part 2. We were to talk about understanding policies, but as I said earlier, we have our next webinar on 31st July, and we'll be discussing policies related to assessment and feedback. And those who are members of LPAC and would like to volunteer to help us also participate, take part in this webinar, You are welcome. You can share with Rukia Mohammed, who is our secretary, so that we can slot you in and help us in some of the webinars. So I think Rukia has something to say about the survey. We normally have a survey after this. Rukia.
Hi everyone, and thank you for staying with us all through. I hope you've learned a lot. So I'm going to share a survey that you can give us feedback so that we know what to improve in future. And also, if you want to participate in co-facilitating with us, that's where you can also share, but you can also share directly with me through our email, which I'm going to share here in the chat. And kindly, maybe when you answer in the survey, put your names the way you want them to appear in your certificate, because you're going to do a certificate. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rukia. And we are going to share the slides and the recording, because this session has been recorded.